Shalom, family. Shalom, shalom. Welcome back. Hope everyone enjoyed their Shabbat yesterday. I hope everyone enjoyed their Shabbat yesterday. And as you can tell by the title, man, we're going to get into looking for the land of Israel. All right, where is the land of Israel? If you follow my channel and my page earlier this week, I posted something on the channel. I'm about to share my screen so you all can see it. Basically a poll, asking everyone where they believe or where they can see the land of Israel being. And it's pretty surprising, all right? So I'm going to share my screen real quick. And for those out here, please comment where you put where you voted. All right, give me 1 second. And right here, all right. So here's the poll. Is the Levant within Israel? Actually, let me update it just to make sure we good. So right here, is the Levant in Israel or is it in sub-Saharan Africa? And surprisingly enough, we have 50% of the voters out of 58 voters voting for it in the Levant, and the other half voting for it in sub-Saharan Africa, which is surprising. Those who follow my channel, you should at least have an idea where, I would put it. So if you're tuning in now, vote. Put a 1 if you put it in for the land of Israel, and put a 2 in the chat if you put it for sub-Saharan Africa. But I'm about to get into, a few sources and findings to put a few credences to where I believe the land of Israel is. Most High willing is not that long, but give me 1 second while I pull it up, and we're going to get into where the land of Israel is. All right. And of course, we will be reading. So please take notes. Please follow along because this will be a pretty lengthy presentation to provide this evidence of where the land of Israel is. All right. Because again, we did have 50% of the voters vote that it was in sub-Saharan Africa, and 50% of the voters that did vote that it was in the Levant area. For those that's just now tuning in, here it goes again. 58 voters, half of them voted for the Levant and half voted for sub-Saharan Africa, which is very interesting. But let's go ahead and get into the presentation. All right. And shalom to those that are tuning in. Give me 1 second. Then we're going to go ahead and get started. So where is the land of Israel? We're going to start off by dealing with Solomon. All right. And we're going to backtrack. So give me a second. All right. So we're going to go to this right here. The Day of the Founding of Solomon's Temple by M.B. Roughton. And you can find this on JSTOR. It's an article dealing with this specific topic. And we're going to need it basically because we're going to establish something after we establish this. So it says, Professor Albright has recently concluded that Solomon died in 923 or 22 BC. The Old Testament assigns to Solomon a reign of 40 years and dates the founding of the temple in Solomon's 4th year. On this evidence, the temple was begun in 597. So remember that because that's very important, because we're going to go to a scripture and look at something. So it says, it is therefore of considerable interest to note that this date is independently confirmed by the king list of Tyre or Tyre. All right. So it's confirmed by the king list of Tyre. So why do they say that? Our problem here is to assertion whether this latter datum deserves any confidence. The absolute dates derived from the Tyre king list are based on the settlements of Carthage was founded in the 7th year of promulgation. The best classical sources date the founding of Carthage in 814 BCE. And if you're familiar to my channel, we reviewed this a few months ago. I believe it was actually last year we reviewed how you had tribes of Israel, specifically of Zebulun and the tribes of Asher. They left Tyre and Sidon under the Queen Dido, and they went into northern Africa, and they founded this city-state known as Carthage. They did not come from sub-Saharan Africa. They did not come from southern Africa into northern Africa. They came from the Levant. They went through Egypt, and they went into Carthage and founded this location. It says very probably on the authority of Timaeus, who was known to have had accesses to the chronicles of Tyre either directly or through Menander, and probably therefore obtained his data from the same source as the one we are concerned with here. The absolute dates thus obtained are at least approximately correct, for taken in conjecture with the figure given in our kings list for the kings of Tyre. They can be checked at one point by reference to Assyrian chronology. So we're about to get into it. Thus, we know that Ahab, the son-in-law of the king of Tyre, Ethobal, and Ahab himself was fighting Salmanassar III of Assyria at the battle of Qatar in 850 BCE. And this is not in sub-Saharan Africa or southern Africa. This is in the Levant area. All right, where this battle took place. Since the events took place towards the end of Ahab's reign, the probability is that Ethobal came to the throne a few decades before 853, and on the basis of 814 for the 7 year of amalgamation. The date obtained for the occasion of Ethobal is 887 BC. Now it goes on to say, now Josephus states that the temple was built in the 12th year of Hiram, 145 years before the founding of Carthage. So they're using a multitude of sources and source material to obtain where they put the beginning of Solomon's temple, and we're going to use that. And it goes on to say, and we can be certain that the reference here is to the founding of the temple, not to its completion. On the basis of 1814 or 814 for the founding of Carthage, the date of the temple would be 959 BC. The same is obtained on the basis of Professor Albright's date for the death of Solomon and the OT figure of 40 years for the Solomon's reign. All right. So we have to keep in mind again that they're placing the date of the temple to start beyond around 959 BCE. All right. Why is that important? Because if we go to 1 Kings chapter 6, it mentions something very, very important. So give me 1 second while I pull up something else real quick on the side, and then we're going to get into what the scripture reads. So it says, and it came to pass in the 488th year after the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign over Israel, in the month of Ziph, which is the 2nd month, that he began to build the house of the Lord. All right. So in the 488th year after the children of Israel were to come out of the land of Egypt, in the 4th year of Solomon's reign is when they began to build the house of the Lord. All right. So if Solomon's reign was, or if Solomon began to build the temple in 595 BCE, as we concluded here, according to the Tyre Kings list, the founding of Carthage, and also according to Josephus, putting the temple being built 100 years before the founding of Carthage, that'll put the children of Israel coming out of Egypt around 1447 BCE. All right. And I know that's not typically what you all hear around the Exodus. Maybe one day soon, or maybe one weekend soon, I will do a video on the Exodus and, where I place that. But again, the Exodus would be around circa the 15th century, all right, around the 1400 period, like it says. All right. So the question is, can we find documentation of an Israelite presence east of Egypt after or around this 1447 year period, or 488 years after or prior to Solomon's reign. All right. So again, let me actually just pull that up on a calculator real quick so you all can see it for reference. Shalom, shalom to everyone that's tuning in. So they said around 959 BCE, and if we add that by what we get in First Kings chapter 6, that'll put us around 1447 BCE for Exodus. So the question is, can we find any events of Hebrews, of Israelites going into the Levant around this time period? And that's what we're going to review next once I show you all this calculation. So again, according to the king's list of Tyre, according to the founder of Carthage, and according to Josephus, Solomon's temple would have been 959 BCE. According to 1 Kings chapter 6, the Exodus would have been 488 years prior to this. So that gives us around this time period right here, 1447 BCE. And Ramses III is not the pharaoh of the Exodus either. So get that out your mind as well. That'll go right against what First King says. So we have the Amarna letters, which is very interesting, and it's right around this same time period, actually around 80 to 100 years later. So the Amarna letters are a group of several hundred clay tablets inscribed in cuneiform writing that dated back to the 14th century BCE and were found at a site of Tel El Amarna. All right, and this is not in sub-Saharan Africa. This is not in South Africa. This is not in East Africa. This is in the Levant. This is in Egypt, all right, where they found this, and we're going to see what is mentioned on these clay tablets. All right, so looking at EA or section EA 286, a throne granted, not inherited, we can look and see a few things mentioned off. We're not going to read all this, but we're just going to read some of the highlighted parts to get a understanding before we get into the material. So we look at lines 16 through 21. We see that they're questioning, why do you love the Apiru but hate the mayors? Accordingly, I'm slandered before the king, my lord. Lines 22 through 31 says, because I say, lost are the lands of the king, my lord, so they're losing the lands, so forth, so on. Lines 44 through 52, it states, lost are the lands of the king, but they did not listen to me. Lost are all the mayors. There is no mayor remaining to the king, my lord. And we can see that this is caused because of the Apirus who have plundered all of the lands of the king. So we see around the same time period that First Kings places the Exodus, we see a group of people known as the Apirus coming into the Levant area, plundering lands and taking over lands. And we see those people in the Levant or in Canaan actually writing letters to the kings of Egypt. All right, and this is what this letter or the Amarna letters are basically getting into. So let's find out who are the Habaru of the Amarna letters. All right, so who are these people mentioned in the Amarna letters? And of course, we're going to look at this source right here, who are the Habaru of the Amarna letters, by S.L. Douglas Waterhouse of Andrews University. And we're going to start from the very top. And shalom, brother Lion Farm. Shalom, brother. So it says, despite numerous studies devoted to the question of who the Habaru were, and lively controversy still continues. The heart of the controversy pertains to the portion of the people referred to as Habaru, who were attempting to take over the land of Canaan. All right. So again, these people were attempting to take over the land of Canaan around 80 to 100 years after First Kings, after where First Kings placed the Exodus based off the date of Solomon's temple being in 959. All right. So it says, in urgent dispatches sent to the Egyptian court of the pharaohs, Amenhotep III and his son Akhenaten, the chieftains of the land of Canaan, speak of the Habaru as a perilous threat to their city-states. All right. And what does this sound like? The conquest of Canaan. This is what we're dealing with right here, the conquest of Canaan, when Israel would have been coming out of the wilderness and taking over the land, or at least trying to. It says it was therefore, or it was discovered, or it was the discovery in 1887 of over 350 cuneiform letters that Tel El Armana in Middle Egypt, the site of Pharaoh Akhenaten capital, which opened up to the modern world new visas or new visitors on what had been occurring at a crucial time when Egypt was losing her grip upon her Asiatic empire. These clay tablets, which were part of the Egyptian royal archives, the so-called Armana letters, continue to raise a good deal of interest. And it is within the Armana archival correspondence that the Habaru appear as powerful foes of Egyptian authority, a major force that had important effects upon events within the region of Palestine or Palestine, Syria. It says the present information in the Habaru is primarily caused by three factors, and we're going to review this. One, the resemblance between the name Habaru and Hebrew. Two, the chronology between, or the chronological relationship between the Armana Habaru and the Israelites. And three, the proximity of their location within the land of Canaan to that of the Hebrews in Joshua's time. The present article intends to address all three of these factors. And I know some of you brothers are who like to comment, and some of you who voted for Israel being in a sub-Saharan Africa, I know you're saying, oh, they're talking about the Canaan within South Africa. No, they're not. All right, get that out of your mind as well, because you're also going to have to point out who are these people that's writing to the Egyptian kings during this time as well. But where are we going to start here? Let's start at the second paragraph. So it says, it needs to be noticed that in these two examples, neither the citizens of letter 47 nor the head of state in letter 67 actually are identified as Habaru, nor do they join the Habaru so as to be part of existing external group. Rather, the charge is made that the defectors act like Habaru people, being disloyal or subservient in the idiom of that time, is to act Habaru, that is, to side with the dangerous Habaru enemy. If it could be shown that the extra or the biblical Hebrews were an active presence in the land of Canaan during the time of the Armana age, which we already reviewed, then the case would become much more attractive in identifying at least some references to the Habaru as referring to the Israelites. In this connection, it may be observed that the late Egyptian texts and inscriptions from the time of Seti I and Ramses II, all right, speak of a portion of Galilee as Israel. This is why Ramses cannot be the Pharaoh of the Exodus, because we're going to get into what he actually said about this location known as Israel, all right, seemingly referring to a territory settled by the Hebrew tribe of Asher. All right, how could I'm not even going to get into that right now, but it says in Papyrus Anatasai the first, composed during the reign of Ramses II, the Arshartites evidently were long enough in the in Canaan to have given rise to a folk tale about a chief of Asher who escaped from an angry bear climbing a tree somewhere near the region of Megiddo. All right, but continuing on, the Israelites had been in Canaan from as early as the beginning of the 13th century BCE. May also be indicated by a smaller Beth Shan stela of Seti I. All right, so we're identifying these people being in the Levant area, in the Canaan area, by way of archaeological findings like these stelas that we're getting to, like we're getting to the Armana stela right now. But it's also these Israelites, or a presence of Israelites, were known in the Beth Shan stela as well of Seti I. The stela commemorates a military campaign in which Pharaoh's force encountered a band of warriors whom Seti scribed called Hebrew or Habaru, the Egyptian equivalent to the cuneiform Habaru. What helps to identify these Apiru warriors is the place they came from. According to the hieroglyphic inscription, their homeland was Yarmutha, all right? A Galilee hill known in scripture as the Yarmouth Heights within the territory of the Hebrew tribe of Issachar. And this is in the Levant Basin. The fact that these Apiru lived in the hill country rather than in the plains and the low hill country of western Palestine accords well with what we know from the biblical records. From when the Israelites came into Canaan, they found the Canaanites in possession of chariots, which could more easily be maneuvered on the level lowland plain. All right. Let's see. So we're going to skip down to the next highlighted. And it says the existence of Apiru on Mount Yarmutha, probably to be identified as the 13th century Hebrews of the tribe of Issachar. So you had tribes of Issachar in Yarmutha during the 13th century. All right. It says Linson added witness to later information concerning Israel whereabouts. As in well known, the so-called Israel Stela, the famous hieroglyphic monument erected in 1207 BCE by Pharaoh Menetha, boasts a victory in battle over a people called Israel. We're going to view that later. Not only is the defeat of Israel considered a major achievement, but the name Israel with the poetic internal structure of the Stela Coda section is considered significant enough to serve as a people entity. In contemporary attainment, the city states in Canaan. All right. So it goes on to say, the Stela thus testifies to the fact that Israel was a well-known ethnic establishment, which had been in existence long enough to enjoy the proximity or the prominent position within the land of Canaan. The most compelling data indicating the Hebrews already were in Canaan by the 14th century are found within the Amarna letters themselves. All right, so they were established in the 1300s BC or in the 14th century. All right. Excuse me, one second. Let me sip of water. All right. So it says, although the scriptural account of the Hebrew conquest of Canaan fails to mention that the land of Canaan was an Egyptian administrative province, the same type of political structure that Joshua encountered at Canaan may be observed in the Amarna correspondence. So it's also mentioned in these letters. It says, as in Joshua's Canaan, the Amarna text speaks of independent city-states whose possess the freedom to farm their own allowances and pursue their own local agendas. They even were able to recruit their own armies, although the Egyptian government did not give official sanction to this practice. While the title of the Canaanite chieftain was man of such and such, a city-state and his appointed officer under an Egyptian overseer was that of a mayor. Nevertheless, within his own Canaanite society, he was known as king, exactly as he is called in the book of Joshua. And all right, you can find that in Joshua chapter 10. It says similarly, the biblical phrase kings of Canaan, which is also in Judges and Joshua 5, finds its duplication in the Akkadian expression kings of Canaan in the Amarna letters. All right, so again, the same thing you can see in scripture mentioning the kings of Canaan. And yes, the kings of Canaan, you can also find it in the Amarna letters written in the same correspondence. It says a sampling of the observances taken from the Amarna letters, which seem to touch upon the very events narrated in Joshua's Judges, is enumerated below as examples of why the Hebrew in some cases indeed may be considered Hebrew. There is a significant silence within the Amarna correspondence about those very places in central Palestine, which the Hebrew armies under Joshua had overrun. In contrast to the many references to the places in the south and to the north, there is no word arriving at the Egyptian court from such places as Jericho, Bethel, Gibeon, Shiloh, Mizpeh, Debris, those very cities captured by Joshua. Was this because the Amarna sources date from a time immediately after the first impact of the invasion into Canaan by Joshua's armed forces? Question mark. The rulers of Gezer writes to inform, and we know Gezer was a territory that the Canaan, or that Joshua and them had took over as well, or went into as well, or invaded in the book of Joshua as well. So it says the ruler of Gezer writes to inform pharaohs that there is a war against me from the mountains. As other missives from the city of Gezer made clear, the enemy in the mountains are the Habaru. Gezer's king pleads with the pharaoh to save his land from the power of the Habaru. All right, so who are these Habaru? These are those people coming out of the wilderness under Joshua. All right, these are the Israelites. So again, Gezer's king pleads with Pharaoh to save his land from the power of the Habaru. From the war is severe. A further Gezer missive makes the telling admission that the Habaru are stronger than we. Gezer's critical position, as found in our monotext, correlates with the city's situation as set forth in the book of Joshua. Even as the Habaru could not overrun Gezer, so too could the Hebrews of Joshua time fail to conquer the city. So we see these things overlapping. And these people were writing from the Levant to the people or to the pharaohs within Egypt. Goes on to say, nevertheless, the Israelites were militarily stronger than their foes and were thus able to impress a tribute of severe work upon the Canaanites of Gezer. Perhaps this is why Gezer rulers report that people can be ransomed from the mountains for 30 shekels of silver. The only way that the king of Gezer could rescue those from his own Cicerenes or citizenry who had been made liable to forced labor was to pay a ransom, the going price for a slave. All right. So the Israelites, or the Habaru, during Joshua's time, they couldn't drive them out. So what they do, they made them subservient to them and they put them on a tribute. All right. It says the letters to Pharaoh from Jerusalem speak of the Habaru as gaining power throughout the country. I am situated like a ship in the midst of the sea. The strong arm of the king of Egypt took the land of Naharam and the land of Cush. But now the Habaru have taken the cities of the Egyptian king. Not a single mayor remains, my lord. All are lost. In this same manner, Abdi-Heba, who was in charge of Jerusalem, makes the revealing admission that he does not hold the office of mayor position of Harzuna, appointed of the crown, but rather is a mere post commander. By coupling this information with events reported to have taken place during Joshua's day, Abdi-Heba surprising status becomes more understandable. The fact that he was not an Awulu or a Hazanu, nor a Sar or king, but rather an ordinary army officer who had been called upon to take charge of the kingdom indicates that he was unusual situation. The possibility presents itself that the previous ruler had been none other than Adonai Zedek, who had been the king of Jerusalem, only to have been defeated and then slain by Joshua. And we see this within Joshua 10, all right, 23 to 26. In spite of this defeat, the Bible points out that the inhabitants of Jerusalem could not be driven out or forced to surrender, having been left to avoid of a leaderless city-state. It would be plausible for the inhabitants of Jerusalem to have placed under a survival military commander. Abib-Heba warned Pharaoh of impending gravity of the situation which he faced. The king has no lands. The Habaru people plundered all of the lands of the king. If there are no archers sent, then lost are the lands of the king. So he was wanting the pharaohs to send archers out because these Hebrew peoples, these Habaru, were invading their land. Though the logogram Sagaz is used exclusively throughout the Amarna letter, a singular exception is to be found in the letters of Abdi-Heba. In his missive, he plainly spells out, to avoid confusion, the name of the enemy as Habiru. All right. In Joshua's day, Jerusalem was a powerful kingdom at the head of the coalition of city-states, enjoying the political influence which extended over the wide range of the surrounding hill country and the Shephelah. But in the Amarna tablets, the political standing of Abihah cities has been reduced to the modest position. Illustrative of the political decline in letter 290 and Abd Heba passes on the bad news that the neighboring city-states of Bahrain had broken their covenant commitment to lose the bond with Jerusalem. All right, and so I'm going to continue on to the next highlighted position because it's going to get more confirmational, basically. So it says the first stage of the disintegration of the Jerusalemite coalition had been the breaking away of the territory of the Gibeonites to the enemy, that is the camp of Israel. A second stage of the disintegration was Joshua's defeat of the coalition army, consisting of the 5 allied kings headed by the ruler of Jerusalem. The book of Joshua reports that the victorious Hebrews slew all 5 kings, and this was the Apiru. Letter 290 reports further disintegration, the loss of the town of Beth Horon. Faced with such disintegration situation, Abd Heba is compelled to warn Pharaoh that if he does not send in military help, then the land of all the kings will desert to the Habaru, which he ended up doing anyways. So it says the most telling convergence between our Mount tablets and the biblical conquest account is found in the letters concerning the interest ruler by the name of Labayu, who controlled the extensive kingdom, which included the region of Shechem. All right, we know about Shechem. It says in Abd Heba's eyes, Labaya had become a traitor. All right, so it says Jerusalem's leader rhetorically asked if Pharaoh would want Egypt's vassal rulers to act in the same treacherously manner as Labadu, who gave Shechem to the Habaru. All right, because you all remember the land was given over peacefully. They really didn't have to go to war with the people in Shechem. It says, since the word Habaru, as here used, is linked with both the determinative of country as well as people, the phrase could be understood to mean Labayu made the land of Shechem into Habaru territory. All right, the tie-in with the biblical history is so striking that one prominent scholar was led to observe this may be one of the early crises in the history of Shechem, which led to its being occupied by a dominantly Hebrew population in the time of Joshua. Now, it says, now where does scripture mention a military country, or nowhere does scripture mention a military conquest of Shechem by the Hebrews? Apparently, the Amarna letter 289 reveals how the Israelites gained possession of the Shechem region without the use of force. All right. In parallel agreement, the archaeological evidence indicates that the late Bronze City, once ruled by the Labuyu, and his sons never suffered destruction, but rather experienced a peaceful transition from Labuyu's time to the later Bronze Age. All right, coincided with what's found. So it goes on to say, as reported by the Bible, after defeating the cities of Jericho and Ai, the Hebrews, under the leadership of Joshua, gathered for a great covenantal renewal as assembly at Shechem. All right, and we also know that Jacob spent time at Shechem, and also Joseph was buried in Shechem, I believe. But it goes on to say, even though the whole region of central Canaan still remained unconquered territory, the entire camp of the Israelites with their defenseless women and children were able to move safely away, all the way from their base camp at Gilead in the plains of Jericho to the convocational at Shechem. Was this due to the largesse or goodwill of the Canaanite chieftain of Labayu? Since the patriarch Jacob had once owned a portion of ground at Shechem, and he willed that his son Joseph, it may have been that the Hebrews pressed a prior legal claim to that region. One can only speculate on the ground of events allowing that the Hebrews a peaceful and safe arrival at Shechem. All right, so with that, we're specifically done with that finding right here. Done with the Amarna letters. So we were able to basically show how, according to these Amarna letters, that were sent out from people or Canaanite peoples, Canaanite inhabitants of the Levant basin to the pharaohs of Egypt about a people known as the Habaru, who are coming in causing havoc, invading the lands, killing a lot of peoples, taking over their lands and things of that sort, which co-aligns with the book of Joshua, and it also lines up scripturally. So again, we have established that we did have an exodus of peoples going into the land of Canaan during the 13th or 14th century by way of these Amarna letters. All right. So let's continue. Next, we're going to deal with the Moneta Stela. All right. So the Moneta Stela, also known as the Israel Stela or the Victory Stela of Moneta, is an ancient inscription by Moneta, a pharaoh in ancient Egypt who reigned from 1213 to 1203 BCE. All right. And this is actually, the son of Ramesses. The son of Ramesses. So 100 years prior to this, we have the Amarna letters, which we just reviewed of the Habaru invading. Now we have another stela that we're going to review about the Israelites. So to do that, we're going to go to Ethnicity and Identity in Ancient Israel. This is by Kenton L. Sparks, source to the left. And we're going to start specifically at the highlighted. And it says, the Moneta Stela seems to provide slim but reasonable evidence of an early context where an entity called Israel stood geographically and sociologically just positioned to the city-states of Canaan. This is not in Southern Africa. This is not in East Africa. This is not in Sub-Saharan Africa. This is in the Levant. It says, in this case, Esquilon, Gezer, and Yonama, none of these locations either is in Sub-Saharan Africa or East Africa. These are in the Levant. So you can't just say Israel is in the Levant. You have to show other locations that correlate to the biblical narrative. But we have archaeological findings, which we're reviewing now, like the Moneta Stele, that shows us that no, Israel is actually east of Egypt, not south or north, whatever you all want to say. Sub-Saharan Africa. But it says, however, this proposition is somewhat misleading unless we rephrase it. We might equally well say that the text of the stele distinguishes between a Canaanite people called Israel and the Canaanite peoples of the nearby city-states. For I doubt seriously that it has allowed us to determine with confidence whether the scribe intended us to locate Israel within Canaan or alongside it. Our confusion along the lines is somewhat obviated by the scribe's use of the people determining in conjunction with Israel by the fact that Israel is probably an endemy rather than an exonym. And 3, by the fact that the name Israel contains the theophoric element El. These are 3 different but related pieces of evidence that suggest we are dealing with a social culture entity that called itself Israel and that worshipped, among other deities, the high god El. Apart from a good deal of speculation, this is about all that can be said regarding the Moneta Stele. But the text provides us with the first evidence of a possible situation in which Israelite ethnicity might have entered or have either emerged or intensified. All right. And again, we already read about the Habaru or the Habiru coming into the Levant. And now we're going to read about what this Moneta Stele has to say about these people called Israel. All right, shalom, shalom. And what do you mean, brother Kenton Alex? Are you referring to something else or something I read within the presentation that has your name, brother? Just wanted to know. But next, we're gonna run over to this source right here, the early history of God. It's Yahweh and the other deities of ancient Israel. This is by Patrick D. Miller. All right. So it says the Israel is some form of, let me reread this. It says that Israel in some form was distinguished from Canaan circa 2000 or 1200, is clear from an inscribed monument of the pharaoh Menetha. The stele dates to the 5th year of the pharaoh's reign, circa 1208, and mentions both Israel and Canaan. All right, so this stele that he wrote or he inscribed mentions this. I'm going to read all of it. It says, the princes are prostrate, saying mercy. Not one raises his head among the 9 bows. Desolation is for Tehuni. Hati is pacified. All right. And we know Hati, I'm not even going to get into that right now, but Hati is pacified. Plunder is the Canaan with every evil, carried off its Esculon, seized up its Gezer. All right. And we just read about the Habaru coming in and invading Gezer. All right. And then we also have archaeological findings and digs, and we know what people was in Escalon, and we also know what people were in Hur, or who are the Hurrians. But let me stop sidetracking, family. It says Yonama is made as that which does not exist, and it says Israel is laid waste, his seed is not. Harry is become a widow for Egypt, all lands together that are pacified. Everyone who is restless has been bound. All right. So the question is, when Menetha and his army went into Israel, and he laid waste Israel, and he laid waste Hurry, and he laid waste, and he carried off Escalon and Gezer, did he go down into sub-Saharan Africa to do this? Or did he go over into the Levant? All right, so did he go down to Menetha? And then again, this is Ramses' son. He's literally telling you that there was an entity called Israel in the Levant. All right, this is how we know. This is how we also know that Ramesses cannot be the Pharaoh of the Exodus, because his son literally invaded and laid Israel waste, as he said. So the question is, did they go into the Levant and do this, or did they go into sub-Saharan Africa? And if so, can you prove it? Because we didn't find these archaeological things in, so we're not finding these archaeological findings in sub-Saharan Africa. They're not going to sub-Saharan Africa to dig for these things. All right. And even right here, this is an inscription from the Menetha stele where he says Israel is waste, seed grain, or it is seed grain, waste Israel, or Yisri is what they said in their language, or in the Egyptian hieroglyphs. All right. So he says Israel is laid waste, his seed is not. The purpose of this passage was to celebrate Egyptian power over varieties of various lands in Syro-Palestine. All right, so they was in Syro-Palestine. Hatti and Huri stand for the whole region of the Syro-Palestine. Canaan and Israel represent smaller units within the area, and Gezer and Ascalon and Yonama are 3 cities within the region. In this hymn to power of the Pharaoh, all these places stand under Egyptian rule. The text distinguishes between Israel and Canaan, as they constitute 2 different terms in the text. Some scholars note that the 2 terms are further distinguished. The word Canaan is written with a special linguistic feature called a determinative, denoting land. All right. Israel is written with a determinative for people. Drawing historical conclusion from the difference in the scribal use of the 2 determinatives has proven problematic. On the one hand, if the determinatives were used accordingly by the Egyptian scribe who wrote this text, then Israel as a people was established by 1200 BCE. All right. So again, we have a victory stela from a pharaoh of Egypt, the son of Ramesses, the Menetha, and he's boasting in his stele that he went and plundered Israel, that he went and handled business over there. Okay. Again, he said Israel is laid waste. And this stele dates back to the 13th century, specifically 1200 BCE. So another thing we can deal with is the Assyrian Lachish battles, all right? When the Assyrians invaded Israel, did they go into the Levant, or did they go into sub-Saharan Africa? If they went into sub-Saharan Africa, is there archaeological findings to support it? If they went into Israel or the Levant area, is there archaeological findings to support it? All right. In 701 BC, during the revolts of King Hezekiah against Assyria, it was besieged and captured by Sennacherib. Despite the defenders' determined resistance, modern excavation of the site has revealed that the Assyrians built a stone and dirt ramp used to level up on the Lachish city wall, thereby allowing the soldiers to charge up the ramp and storm the city. Excavations revealed approximately 1,500 skulls in one of the caves near the site. So before we get into this, we're going to read a little bit of Second Chronicles just to get a brief understanding about what we're about to get into. All right, so we're going to start at verse 1. This is Second Chronicles chapter 32. It says, after these things, the establishment thereof, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came and entered into Judah and encamped against the fenced city and thought to win them for himself. All right, so according to Second Chronicles 32, Sennacherib would have been coming into the cities of Jerusalem, or excuse me, specifically the cities of Judah. All right, so again, did he come into the Levant or sub-Saharan Africa? Verse 2, and when Hezekiah saw that Sennacherib was come and that he was proposed to fight against Jerusalem, he took counsel with his princes and his mighty men to stop the waters of the fountains which were without the city, and they did help him. So there was gathered much people together who stopped all the fountains that they broke that ran through the midst of the land, saying, why should the king of Assyria come and find much water? Also, he gathered himself, or he strengthened himself and built up a wall that was broken and raised up the towers and another wall without, and repaired Millo in the city of David and made darts and shields in abundance. All right, so again, Second Chronicles 32 just gives you a brief overview of the whole Assyrian Judah battles. All right, this whole Assyrian Lachish situation. And you can just read that for context. So I brought this scripture out to lay a foundation because we're about to find, or about to see if we can look into archaeological findings to support the scripture and the location of it being in the Levant. And to do that, we're going to go to constructed the Assyrian siege ramp at Lachish, text, iconography, archaeology, and photogrammetry. All right. And again, we're going to deal with archaeological findings to support this. And one thing we're going to be looking at first is a Assyrian siege ramp that they use, or that the Assyrians used to enter in the cities of Judah. All right, they actually found one, and they found this within the city of Judah, within Lachish. They did not find this in sub-Saharan Africa or East Africa. And I'm going to keep reiterating it, or keep saying that, because we got 50% of my viewers that voted for it being in sub-Saharan Africa, and the other 50 that voted for the Levant. So again, if you do have opposing thoughts and would like to express that with information you have, I will put the link in once I finish. So feel free to join. I don't bite. But it says the Neo-Assyrian of the 9th to the 7th centuries BCE was the first large-scale empire that controlled wide parts of the ancient Near East, from Iran to Egypt. The mighty Assyrian army developed efficient military technologies and tactics, and was able to win any open battle or take any fortified city. In 701 BCE, Lachish was attacked by the Assyrians, led by King Sennacherib. Lachish was a flourishing Canaanite city in the 2nd millennium BCE, and the second most important city in the kingdom of Judah from the late 10th to the early 9th centuries BCE. The siege ramp constructed at Lachish, the siege ramp constructed at the site by the Assyrians is the only surviving physical example of their military prowess in the entire Near East. All right. This case is also outstanding in the amount of data available for a single historical event. Our information on the siege of Lachish in 701 BCE comes from a variety of sources. Again, so they're compiling this information from a variety of sources, not just off maps. So it says the biblical text, the Assyrian assault on the kingdom of Israel and Judah and the battle of Lachish are mentioned in a number of books in the Bible. Assyrian siege ramps are mentioned twice, as we can see in 2 Kings 19 and 32, and as well as in Isaiah 37 and 33. The biblical text inspired Lord Byron to write the celebrated poem, The Destruction of Sennacherib, in 1815, before any archaeology activity had taken place in Mesopotamia or the Levant. All right, so again, I specifically highlighted this to show where they took this, or where the archaeological activity had taken place, which was in the Levant and Mesopotamia. It was not sub-Saharan Africa. It says biblical scholars have dealt intensively with these traditions. They did not, however, pay any attention to the technology or the technical aspects of the war. It says these were first discovered in Mesopotamia in 1847 by the pioneer excavations of Paul Emil Bota at Karsabad. One second, I feel like I skipped over something. I guess not. But it says they represented the Assyrian army in various battles. Also, this was discovered in Mesopotamia in 1846. But it says in 1847, Austin Hearing Lanyard excavated at the Assyrian city of Nineveh and uncovered the palace of Sennacherib with the infamous relief in room, what is this, XXXVI, that is 36, that depicts the Assyrian attack on Lachish. In this relief, Assyrian forces are shown assaulting the city with battle rams and 2 siege rams, one at the gate and the other at the right of the gate. The Assyrian reliefs have been extensively discussed in the literature relating to various aspects of the ancient warfare. It says Akkadian inscriptions, including chronology, and sometimes letters describe various Assyrian activities in Judah. All right, so again, we know that Israel is in the Near East because it's also attested by other peoples, specifically like the the Assyrians who came in and did the sacking. They wrote about Judah being in the Near East, or specifically the Levant area, and they wrote specifically in the Akkadian inscription, or in the Akkadian cuneiform. It says various scholars have emphasized the rhetorical and propaganda aspects of these documents. Excavation at various sites in the Near East, various excavation sites in the Near East, all right, not sub-Saharan Africa, have uncovered cities destroyed by the Assyrian army. A siege ramp, however, has been identified only at Lachish, all right, and this is in Judea. The site was extensively excavated in the past by 3 expeditions, the first in the 1930s, the second in the 1960s, and the third between 1974 and 1994. 4 more recent expeditions excavated between 2013 and 2017. Facts, bro. 50% voted for Israel being in sub-Saharan Africa. It says the case study of Lachish was presented a unique opportunity in combining diverse sources, Assyrian texts, the biblical text, iconography, and archaeology. Our analysis has shown that the combination of all these sources can add up to the better understanding of the construction of the ramp at Lachish. A major problem faced by the Assyrian army was the supply of stones. Over 1 million stones were needed. Where did these stones come from? Collecting natural stones from the surface around the site will require a great deal of time and would slow the construction of the ramp. A better solution would be a quarry of these stones as close as possible to the southern end of the ramp. At Lachish, there is indeed an exposed cliff of a local bedrock exactly at the point where one should be expected. So they're finding all these things dealing with the Assyrian siege on Lachish in the Levant. All right. The Assyrian ramp was constructed from the south to the north, from the points furthest from the city walls. The raw material was quarried on the spot or a few hundred meters away from the southern end of the ramp. The stones were medium sized and hence not too heavy to handle. Time was main concern of the Syrian army. Hundreds of laborers worked day by day carrying stones, possibly in 2 shifts of 12 hours. They was doing all this just to attack Judea, family. Just to attack Lachish. The manpower was probably supplied by prisoners of war and forced laborers of the local population. The laborers were likely protected by massive shields placed at the northern end of the ramp and advanced towards the city of a few meters each day. At the end of the construction, the top surface of the ramp was uneven and very rough. Earth and even wooden planks were laid to create a smooth passageway to the top of the stones up which the heavy siege engines were pushed. The battle rams were suspended inside the siege engines and on iron chains, which enabled them to swing back and forth without seize and eventually shattered. So let's continue. So this is the we're going to get into some better depictions of it, of course, but this is what they sketched out in this study or in this finding. And of course, we do have this in 2 Kings. Therefore, thus saith the Lord concerning the king of Assyria, he shall not come into the city, nor shoot arrows. We see them shooting arrows, nor come before the shield. We see them with the shields, nor cast the banks against it. And we see them with the banks or the ramps. All right. And if you used to go to the Strongs, of course, look up bank, you'll see the definition of this, and it means ramp, basically, a mound or a ramp. And that's exactly what the Assyrians built. But here's better, let's see, better pictures of the ramps. All right. What they used to build. And again, they found this in the Levant at Lachish in Judah. And again, this is what the Assyrians depicted themselves doing. The same thing the Bible said they was doing. So let's continue on. And we're going to go to an analysis of crania from Tel Dewar using multiple discriminant functions. And we're going to get into some more evidence of this battle between Judah and Assyria. It says, historical and archaeological evidence suggests that the Iron Age biblical city of Lachish had a multinational population of diverse geographical origins. All right, I'm not going to read this full abstract. I just wanted to read this so we can know what we're dealing with. We're dealing with the biblical city of Lachish. He says, this paper presents the results of a restudy of a sample of a male adult crania from the Iron Age Lachish series using metric variables and cranial various as discriminant functions. All right. And we're reading this because not only do we have in scripture the Assyrians coming causing havoc, killing a lot of Judeans, we also see we're also going to look at pictures of the Assyrians, hanging Judeans and also bashing them into the ground and killing them. We should expect to find, I guess you can say, a burial mound or a large mound of these Israelites buried if this actually happened within this location, if the Bible be true. And that's what we're going over. All right, we're going to look at these cranials, and we're going to see who they say these people were. I guess you can say what they look like, basically, or what they resemble. So it says the archaeological site of Tel Dewari is located 20 miles south of Jerusalem. This is not 20 miles south of Jerusalem, South Africa either. All right. Its horizon spans the Bronze through the Iron Ages. The site was excavated and crania recovered between 1933 and 1936 by the Wellcome Marston Archaeological Research Expedition to the Near East. The site is associated with the biblical city of Lachish. Tufnell notes that the biblical and Assyrian sources suggest that Sennacherib sacked and burned Lachish approximately 700 BC. The archaeology tends to support this date. All right, so the archaeology tends to support this date. Lachish at this time was part of the Judean kingdom. Tufnell gives the following important historical derived dates associated with the archaeological levels as defined at Tel Dewari. All right, and specifically, we are dealing with or looking at levels. I guess you can say levels 4 and 3. We're looking at the time period between 900 and 700 BCE because that lines up with Sennacherib coming in and sacking Judea or Lachish. So we're going to skip this. We're going to go to where it says levels 4 and 3 contain further confusing evidence of possible Northeast African presence of trade. In fact, Tufnell implies that level 4 is to be distinguished from level 3 because level 4 has North African objects. I'm going to skip down to right here. It says most of the Iron Age crania came from Tomb 120. And if they was ever able to, exhume Israelite remains, it would be from this specific tomb 120, because this is where we find those remains of Sennacherib, killing the Jews and throwing them into the pit. But it says most of the Iron Age crania came from tomb 120, which had goods assigned to both levels 4 and 3. It is well to note that the several chambers were excavated and found to contain human and animal remains, as well as pottery identifiable and as aware of 7th to 8th century BCE. So this stuff dated back to the 7th to 8th century BCE. And it dates all in a jumbled mass. And it was found all in a jumbled mass. And this was true of Tomb 120. So they say perhaps Sennacherib pillage explains the nature of the burials. So again, Tomb 120 is attributed to the pillage of Sennacherib. It says it is suggested that the ossuary was probably connected with the salvage of Lachish after the partial destruction of Sennacherib and king of Assyria in 701 BCE. So we're going to go right here where it says, we can just start right here. It says, it is illustrated because this means value hides the variation revealed by the analysis of the series and the individual unknown cranial, and shows many to have strong resemblance to more southern, both Egyptian and non-Egyptian series. Even when Lachish is a choice, it is possible to say that the objective evidence does not deny an hypothesis of biological heterogeneity in some general senses at Lachish, with specific historical and archaeological data unequivocally predict. It is suggested that the Egyptian Nubian presence is supported, right? So they're saying it was Egypto-Nubian presence supported within the Lachish remains in Tomb 120. All right, and again, they found this within the Levant in the land of Judah. Now, to get a brief understanding of what they mean by the Egyptian Nubian presence that they found within Tomb 120, we're going to go over to the Journal of Anthropological Institute of Great Britain. And we're going to start up here where it says, many travelers of anthropologists have noticed the likeness of Armenians to Jews. Their moral characters are also very similar. I do not speak of their common traditions because these may be due to modern intercourse. Once in Palestine, Jews absorbed the native population. From Egypt, they carried with them perhaps some Negrotic tribes, and thus formed the type shown by the Jews of Lachish. So this is what they mean by a Egypto-Nubian presence, a Negrotic type presence. So those people found within Tomb 120, they were Negroid. He goes on to say the Jews, however, also preserved two types, the one acquired with the Nardic influence, and those would be those invaders, those Japhetic invaders, like the Hurrians and the Hittites that came down from the north. And it goes on to say, and the other due to intermixture with the ground races and the other tribes of Palestine and the Negroes from Egypt. So it says the first type may be considered as forming the atrocity. And it says it is from this that the Portuguese Jews, or they would descend to Portuguese Jews, all right, while the German Jews will come from the other. All right, and we know that the Portuguese Jews are, known to be Negroid, known to be dark in complexion. And we also know that the Portuguese Jews actually have ancestry, have oral history from coming from Babylon. So they would have been related to these Jews that these Negrotic Jews from Lachish in Tomb 120. They would have been related to them. So continuing, we're going to look at the British Museum Lachish reliefs, all right, depictions of what they said these Judeans look like in the Levant area. And we can see why they said they look Negrotic, or they was a Negrotic tribe, and why the Portuguese Jews would descend from them. See if we get a little better close-up picture. Kind of coarse or woolly type hair with Negroid features. All right. They don't look like your typical sub-Saharan Africans, but they do look Negroid. Again, these are more depictions. We see Israelites over here being hung. All right, these brothers possibly could have been thrown into that tomb 120 that we see, or that we just read about, having that Egyptian, Nubian presence, or that Negrotic presence. And I'm looking at the chat from my phone. I'm gonna try my best to catch up to the chat once I'm done. But facts, brother Line Farm, and that tomb 120 is possibly, something we can get these Israelite haplogroups from. Find out the true remains of these Israelite Y-DNAs. All right, here's more pictures. Again, these are the siege ramps again. Israelite women being carried down. All right, again, Israelite man being hung right here by the Assyrians. All right, Israelite babies, Israelite man right here being slain. Definitely see the Negroid features, coarse woolly hair. Again, so we understand why they said the people in Tomb 120 were Negrotic or Egyptian Nubian. So next we're going to deal with the Ezekiel inscriptions. All right. I told you all this is going to be long. We're going to be reading a lot. All right. So 1 second. The Ezekiel inscriptions are a tablet inscriptions of the reign of Sennacherib, discovered in the mid-19th century in the library of Asarusa, Nepal. It describes an Assyrian campaign by Sennacherib against Hezekiah, king of Judah, including the conquest of Azekah. And the question is, where was Sennacherib going to? Because again, I have a lot of people that likes to, comment on my videos and, say that all these locations were in, sub-Saharan Africa. Abraham went south into Nubia. He didn't go south into Levant. So the question is, where did all these things happen? Especially when it comes to the biblical narrative, when it comes to the Assyrian captivity, when it comes to the Babylonian captivity, when it comes to the Roman occupation, when it comes to the Persian captivities, where's the proof of this happening in sub-Saharan Africa? Milk and Honey, essay on ancient Israel and the Bible in appreciation of the Judaic Studies program at the University of California, San Diego. All right, source to the left. If we accept the datum of the Samaria was conquered in Hezekiah's 6th year, then it naturally follows that his 14th year would fall within the reign of the Assyrian king Sargon II, rather than the reign of Sennacherib, because 2 Kings 18-13 may introduce the account recorded in segment B1, and because the segment allows from the participation of someone other than Sennacherib as the king of Assyria, it requires no forced understanding of the text to imagine Sargon as the king. Extra biblical evidence adds weight to this hypothesis. For example, Sargon's army did in fact campaign in the Levant in Sargon's 10th regional year. They camped in the Levant. There is every indication that this year coincided with the 14th year of Hezekiah. Gershon Gallia has persuasively argued in his favor of dating the fall of Samaria to 720 BCE. Sargon's 2nd year and Hezekiah's 6th year. He bases his argument on several factors. In one, the Babylonian Chronicle. The Sumerian, ravaged by Shalmaneser V, could be the entire northern kingdom of Israel rather than the city itself. 2, the biblical text. Although connected Shalmaneser to the events associated with the conquest of Samaria, does not explicitly state that he was the king who conquered it. And 3, the numerous testimonies to Samaria overthrow in the time of Sargon cannot be ignored or presumed false. By Gilead's dating, Sargon's military endeavor on Judah doorsteps in 712 matches Hezekiah's 14th year precisely. According to Sargon Analytics and Display Inscriptions, according to Sargon Analytics and Display Inscriptions, it was necessary at this time to put down a revolt in the Philistine city of Ashdod, led by a certain Yamani. The earliest is Nineveh Prism, a fragment D. The account breaks off during a description of Ashdod's campaign, and it is impossible to tell how much further the text went on. In English, it reads as follows: "But these accursed Hittites conceived the idea of not delivering the tribute and started a rebellion against their ruler. They expelled him, Yamani, a commoner without claim to the throne to be a king over them. They made sit down on the very throne of his former master, and they prepared the city for the attack. Lucana of 3 lines, its neighborhood of a moat, they prepared a depth of 20 cubits, and even reached the underground waters. In order to the rulers of Philistia, Judah, Edom, Moab, and those who live by the sea, and bring tribute. All right. So again, we see that Judah is mentioned within this text by Sargon. All right. So let's continue on and dig into this. So it says Sargon claims that Judah received an invitation to join Yamani's anti-Assyrian coalition. Whether or not Yamani was temporarily successful in alienation from Assyria, the states here mentioned is not stated. But the biblical text testifies that Hezekiah rebelled against the Assyrian overlord, and that's going to be mentioned, or that's actually what Sargon mentions within these inscriptions. If this was the context of Judah's rebellion, Sargon was very well have responded with a show of military strength. The text breaks off just as it's getting interesting. It appears that several cities were engaged by the Assyrian forces, but only Ashdod's name is preserved. Another, Lu, is partially preserved. Parallel sources also mention Gath and Ashdod Yam. For the pertinent inscriptions, we are able to ascertain a general order of events relating to the campaign. All right, and again, these locations that we're about to review, that's inscribed within Sargon's, specifically within his inscriptions, we're going to see that they are in the Middle East or the Levant. And if you have anything, to show that they're not, you can go ahead and, get ready and show that for me. But it says the Philistines of Ashdod, accursed Hittites, depose, expel Sargon's vassal kings, Ahiti, and evaluate Yamani as the king in his place. The Ashdodites began preparations for invasion, including the digging of a moat and sending a conspiratorial message to the neighboring kingdoms, to Judah, Edom, Moab, and other Philistine cities, and pay a payment to Egypt for military assistance. So did Judah actually have a military encounter with the Assyrians at this time? We do have an epigraphic evidence to support this conclusion. The text, commonly known as Azekah's inscription, describes the siege of the fortified city of Azekah in Judah by the Assyrian forces. It consists of 2 fragments, originally published separately, but in 1974, Nadav va Nahama or Naaman discovered the joint and made a preliminary analysis. So it says he dated the inscriptions to Sennacherib in 701 BCE, campaigned against Judah. However, his position has been dated or has been called into question recently by several scholars who has preferred to date the events described to Sargon's campaign. So when dealing with this Azekah's inscription, some scholars lean towards it being during the time of Sennacherib, and some scholars lean towards it being in the time of Sargon, based off different things, which is why he said several scholars are in question of it. But it says there are those who prefer the date of the events described in Sargon's text in 712. Their reason are as follows. The inscription locates Azekah between the borders of the land of Judah, because the Assyrians turned Ashdod and the environs into a province as a result of the 712 campaign, and because Sennacherib's Anos referred to Ashdod as a vassal kingdom as a result of the 701 campaign. The inscription must have been composed between 712 and 701. Furthermore, there is no evidence for any Assyrian campaign against the Philistia or the Philistia in this period. Therefore, the events described must refer to Assyria's last venture into territory, which will be under Sargon. But it says the literary style of the inscription is closely akin to Sargon's epic description of his campaign under Urartu, the last major campaign that Sargon undertook before the Asshad affair. The writer spells the deity name Anshar rather than Assur, which is typically of many of the Sargon's early inscriptions. For these reasons, the inscriptions is best dated to the time of Sargon. And it goes on to say, an English translation of the text reads as follows. Into Judah I approached the course of my campaign. I received the tribute of the kings with the power of my might, of Asar, my lord, the district of Hezekiah of Judah, like a hurricane, Azekah, his stronghold, which is located between my land and the land of Judah. So actually, we have Judah being mentioned within the Azekah inscriptions by Sargon, and we also have King Hezekiah being mentioned within these inscriptions by being mentioned in the Azekah inscriptions. And even down here, it says, I approached Ekron, a royal city of the Philistines, with Hezekiah, or which Hezekiah had captured and strengthened for himself. It finishes up by saying the Eskai, or the Azekah inscription, confirms that Sargon not only settled matters in Ashdod and other Philistine cities, but also punished Judah for his support of Yamani's rebellion. At the very least, the Assyrians besieged Azekah and conquered it. It says there is a reference to the siege and conquest of another city. Though unnamed, it is identified as the former Philistine city that Hezekiah had recently taken over. Galea makes a good case for identifying the city as Ekron. And continuing on to 2 Kings, verse 18 through 14. And Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent the king of Assyria to Lachish, saying, I have offended. Return from me. That which thou puttest on me will I bear. And the king of Assyria appointed unto Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents and 30 talents of gold. All right, so this is just going into what was being mentioned in the inscriptions right here by him coming into Judah. All right, and them paying ransom and things to, or paying tribute to the king of Assyria. Right here, it specifically says Judah, Edom, Moab, and other Philistine cities, they made payment to them. All right. And it's mentioned in 2 Kings 18 and 14. So this is the last inscription we're going to get into. All right. This is the last inscription we're going to get into. So again, I'm going to throw the link in the bio once I'm done. And if you do have any questions or anything, please go ahead and get those composed now. And I'll try my best to, answer everybody's comments and things once I wrap up. So we're going to be dealing with Jehoiakim's tablets. So Jehoiakim's ration tablets date from the 6th century BCE and describe the ration set aside for a royal captive identified with Jehoiakim, king of Judah. Tablets from the royal archives of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, were unearthed. All right, they unearthed this in Babylon, family. And in the ruins of Babylon that contained food rations paid to captives and craftsmen who lived around the city. So let's get into it. The Bible book. Big Idea Simply Explained. Source to the left. It says the Bible, or the biblical account of the fall of Jerusalem and the exile of the Judean people to Babylon largely corresponds with the historical evidence. All right, so this actually corresponds with historical evidence. The narrative is corroborated with a wealth of archaeological findings and earlier accounts. All right, so where did they find these quote-unquote archaeological findings? Where did these archaeological findings take place, and where did these accounts take place? Was it in what we know as today as the so-called Middle East? Or was it in sub-Saharan Africa? Was it in South Africa? Was it in East Africa? Just help me understand why you all are saying the land of Israel is in sub-Saharan Africa without any definitive proof. These include a passage from Babylonian Chronicles, a set of ancient tablets discovered in the 19th century that describes the sack of Jerusalem in 597 BCE, and also Jehoiakim's ration tablets, which are unearthed from Nebuchadnezzar's royal archive during evacuations in Babylon or excavations in Babylon in the early 20th century. Evidence of the Babylonian rampage through central Judah in 588 through 586 BCE also includes pottery fragments known as clay ostracross. So they also found pottery that links this up. In the World Renowned Lachish Letters, a series of ancient Hebrew missives written in carbon ink on clay tablets, which were discovered during excavations at Tel Lachish in 1935. Next, we're going to go to documents from the Old Testament to get a little more information on these tablets that they found. Where should we start? One second, family. I guess we can read the whole thing. Yeah, I guess we can read the whole thing. So it says mass deportation as an instrument in the subjugatory policies of the Babylonian and Assyria is first mentioned in cuneiform documents from the time of Salmanassar I. Sargon II makes specific mention of the captivity of the 10 tribes of Israel in the year 721 BCE. Until the comparatively recent, however, no reference in cuneiform sources was to be found to the captivity of Judah. There was indirect evidence, viz., the occurrence in business documents from Nippur of the time of Xerxes I and Darius II, of many personal names similar to many well-known OT names or Old Testament names found in Ezra, Nehemiah, and these were assumed to be descendants of the deportees. We have now from time of Nebuchadnezzar I or II texts which throw new light on the treatment of the young King Jehoiakim, all right, who went into captivity in 597 BCE. It was known that from Jeremiah that he had been pardoned some 37 years later by evil Merodach and given a daily allowance. The new text, which belonged to a much earlier period, around 595 BCE, refers to the monthly rations of oil allotted to Jehoiakim. The texts were found along with a large number of other cuneiform Babylonian sites. The texts were found along with a large number of other cuneiform tablets at the site of the ancient Babylonian during excavations carried out there by R. Koldewey from 1899 to 1917 family. So again, I was looking at something, but to mention what I was going to say about this part right here, it's important to know that they found these things within Babylon, all right? And they found this in Babylon. It's actually given credence or attestation or more strengthening the evidence that Israel is in the Near East, all right? Because we're actually going to see that he mentions Jehoiakim and also other things that solidifies this location being in the Near East, specifically with them finding this in Babylon. All right, they didn't find this in Lower Egypt, like those old maps that show Babylon and Lower Egypt. For those of you who voted for Sub-Saharan Africa, I know about all the maps that you all use. Yes, maps do show Babylon and Egypt, but is that the ancient Egypt? No. It says, let's skip down. It says the contribution which the brief reference in these texts to Jehoiakim or Yahukkanu, which is the name in cuneiform, and his contemporaries make to our knowledge of the conditions during the exile is highly significant. From 2 Kings, and Jehoiakim, the king of Judah, went. It says the reference to the 5 sons of the king raises a problem, as text C is dated from the 13th year of Nebuchadnezzar. And as we know from 2 Kings 24:8, Jehoiakim was only 18 years of age when he was carried off in the 8th year of Nebuchadnezzar. This would mean that the sons must have been born during the first 5 years of captivity. While, however, it is possible that the references to it is to the brothers of Jehoiakim's sons of Jehoiakim. It seems more probable that Jehoiakim's own sons are meant, since they are referred to as still in the hands of the Jewish attendant, or Kenaiah. It says, Shealtiel, therefore the eldest son of Jehoiakim, and the father of Zerubbabel, must have been born about 798 BCE. Thus, Zerubbabel could be considerably older than has hereto been supposed by Haggai was prophesying, or when Haggai was prophesying. So these are names mentioned within cuneiform found within Babylon. It says other Judeans are mentioned by name in the text, such as Uramalik, Gadiel, which is found in Numbers, Shelemiah, which is found in Ezra, and Semachia, which is found in First Chronicles. These names also occur in the Lachish letters. Now it says, apart from the captivities or the captives from Judah, the text contained names of many other recipients, including the kings and attritions of rations, whom all these people were exiles, or whether some were employees of the king, it is impossible to say. They were drawn from Philistia, Phoenicia, Elam, Media, Persia, Egypt, Lydia, and Cilicia. All right, and none of these places are in Africa besides Egypt. It says, we have thus a glimpse of the cosmopolitan character of life in Babylon at the period of exile. And this is what's mentioned within the text to Yahukkanu, or Jehoiakim, the king of the land of Yahudah. This is in cuneiform, family. This is found in Babylon. Where they're talking about? They're not talking about sub-Saharan Africa. If so, where's the land of Judah and sub-Saharan Africa? Can somebody show me the land of Judah and sub-Saharan Africa? It says, for Yahukkanu, king of the land of Yahudu, for the 5 sons of the king of the land of Yahudah, for the 8 men, Judeans, each Selah, for Yahukkanu, the 5 sons, for Yahukkanu, sons of the king of the land, Yakuku or Yakudu, seal of the 5 sons of the king of Yakudu by the hands of Kamar. It says, Yahukkanu, king of the land of Yahudah, the 5 sons of the king and the land of Yahudah by the hands of Kamana. And to finish up, family, we're going to go to text history, historiography, and the study of biblical text. And we're just going to look at this chart because this is other findings that you can go look up yourself, and it'll solidify, people within the Bible and ancient place locations from the scripture as being in the Levant. Yes, I do believe Israelites made their way into Africa. I do not believe Israel is in Africa, though. If you, the best you can get me saying is Northeast Africa. So right here it says, all this is found within the Book of Kings on your left, and to the right is found in ancient Near East text. So you can learn about King Ahab and the Ahab at the Battle of Qatar. You can look at that. You can look at the Mesha or the Mesha inscriptions, king of Moab and the vassal of Ahab. You can learn about King Jehu in the Jehu, a tributary. Also Jehu the Omeride, specifically with the black obelisk. You can learn about Joash or Joash of Israel in the Tel Arima Stele. You can learn about Menahem in the Menahem of Samaria, in the Annals of, or the Annals the Third, specifically dealing with the Mayhem tributary. All right. And you can also learn about Jehoahaz and Ahaz of Judah in the Nimrod slabs. All right. So again, quick reminder of what we went over. First, we dealt with establishing the date of Solomon's temple. comparing that with First Kings, bringing us back to 1447, possibly the date of the Exodus. From there, we've tried to see if we can find any presence of Israelites conquering the land of Canaan. And we did that by going to the Amarna letter, which was about 80 to 100 years after First Kings places the Exodus. From there, we went 100 years later to the Bernetta Stele, where it talks about the king or the Pharaoh of Egypt actually laying Israel waste, letting us know that Israel was a people, they was an entity, it was a location in the lands of Canaan, in the Near East, in the Levant. From there, we went to the Assyrian/Lachish battles. We looked at the Assyrian ramp that they used that's mentioned within scripture and how they found that within specifically Lachish, Judah, and the Levant. We also looked at the cranial analysis that they found from the tomb that Sennacherib had left the Judeans in and saw that it was a Egyptian Nubian presence. We also went to the Ezekiel's inscriptions, all right, dealing with King Hezekiah and how this inscription mentions King Hezekiah and Judah being paying ransoms to the Assyrian peoples or to Sennacherib specifically. And then we finished off with Jehoiakim's tablets, all right, and how he is mentioned in the Babylonian Chronicles and how they found this in Babylon, and it mentions specifically Jehoiakim and the land of Judah, all right. So again, there's plenty of evidence to support the fact that Israel is a entity in the Levant, all right. It is in the Levant, and it was not in sub-Saharan Africa. So again, I'm about to step out of this, and I'm gonna go ahead and add the link in for those who want to tune in or come on and share something. And shalom to everybody that's tuning in, man. We got a good amount of people in here. All right, I'm about to drop this link, then I'm gonna catch up with the chat. So, and then I'm gonna go ahead and share this again. So again, please don't feel bad if you voted for Sub-Saharan Africa. Please put a 2 in the chat. Speak up. Speak up on what you voted for. If you voted for Sub-Saharan Africa and the Levant, put a 1 in the chat. All right, because again, it's split 50-50, 58 votes. I don't know how you watch my channel and believe Sub-Saharan Africa, Israel is in Sub-Saharan Africa. First of all, there was no Bantu in Sub-Saharan Africa. There was no Igbo, there was no Yoruba in Sub-Saharan Africa until about 2,000-3,000 years ago. So if Israel was in Sub-Saharan Africa, you're not Israelites. Just based off the facts, genetically, you're not from Africa. All right. So let's get into these comments. Let's see. Brother says the Amarna letters are unusual in Egyptology research because they are mostly written in the script known as Akkadian cuneiform. That's what I noticed as well. How did that end up being written in cuneiform, right? If we're dealing with Canaanite peoples, was it possibly a link to the Amorites? Because we do know that the Amorites did speak Akkadian, or were mainly responsible for spreading the Semitic language into Mesopotamia. So that could be from, I guess you could say, Amorites being sacked and writing in cuneiform, possibly. And the brother says, remember, right? Specific king writes to Abib the Haba, to Pharaoh, and he says, remember, Jerusalem used to be filled with other groups, and that's true. And he brought out Joshua 15:63. And that's dealing with the Habaru coming in and invading this same land. What did the king of Jerusalem say? The land is plundered. We have no more mayors. The Habaru are taking over. That's plundering our land. All right. Let's see. Let's see what else. Shalom, brother. Shalom, brother. J Keys. Brother says, Manette, the stellar deep earliest evidence of the name Israel. Indeed, indeed it is. Indeed, indeed it is. Facts. El is short for Elohim. Oh, I got you, brother. All praises, all praises. The brother says, I do recall secular evidence that the Pharaoh during the Exodus was not Ramses. The name was transcribed into copied text of the Bible to match European 6,000 year young earth theory. And that's facts. That's facts. And we can even go through it right now. People like to go, well, the Bible says the Israelites built treasure cities in Pithom and Ramses. That's what you call an anachronism. There was no Ramses when the Israelites were in Egypt. They were in Goshen. They were in Avaris. There was no such thing called Ramesses when our ancestors were in Egypt. It's what you call an anachronism. All right. What happened was when our ancestors did compose the Bible, it was known as Ramesses at that time. So they said we're going to name it Ramesses. That's why earlier it's named Goshen. All right. They lived in the Hyksos capital. There was no Ramesses during the Israelites. When the Israelites was in Egypt. I might actually do a video on who it was, but you have a timeline now. You have a timeline based off the date of Solomon's temple and First Kings. If you want to know who the Pharaoh of the Exodus was, start your research there based off First Kings and also based off the founding of Solomon's temple. The brother says facts and ehaplogroups begin in Saudi Arabia. That's facts. A lot of ehaplogroups do begin in Saudi Arabia, as well as E1B1A. They have a deep, deep ancient history in Saudi Arabia. That's facts. And if anybody has time, they want to learn a little more about that, look up the old Yemeni haplogroups. Look up old Yemeni haplogroup findings. In facts, that's what I'm saying. 50% of the people voted for it being in sub-Saharan Africa. That's wild. I want to know what they're looking at. The vote for it being in sub-Saharan Africa. What they looking at that we don't know about? What have they found that we do not know about to convince them that it is in sub-Saharan Africa? Oh, Israel's too small. No, it's not. No, it's not. Shalom, brother. Shalom, brother. Please continue to teach on these topics regarding Levant and Israelite migrations post-Exodus. Shalom, brother, and thank you. I will. Like I said, y'all willing, I will be doing a presentation on the Exodus, showing evidence of, Exodus events, when it happened and things like that. Probably trying to prove the Exodus, basically. The brother says, tell the hateful nation the out of African concept is false, as there are Sidis and Afro-Iranians and Anus. Facts. I wonder who those specific peoples descend from. Because a lot of people say the Sidis are Africans, but that's probably a lie. The Afro-Iranians, they say they're Africans. That's probably a lie as well. They probably been there for a while. But it says deep finds, facts. Yeah, brother. I ain't gonna say who I believe it is, but yeah. I know it's not Ramesses. You're gonna have to deal with that 18th dynasty, brothers, family. You're gonna have to deal with it if you want to deal with the Pharaoh of the Exodus. And again, man, the link is in there. I had what's 58 divided by 2? About 30 something people vote for Israel being in sub-Saharan Africa. So please join, provide the evidence, provide the scripture, show why you believe this. And shalom, sister. Shalom. Thank you for tuning in. The brother says, tell Dewari, close view of skulls of tomb 120 remain. Over 1,000 humans have been thrown into this. All right. Wow. That's big. That's big. That's a lot of bodies, and we know that goes back to uh Sennacherib, I believe it was. Wow, I can't wait until they do the DNA of those remains, so we can see what those people's haplogroups were. The brother says they say yes, why DNA belongs to haplogroup B and EP2, E1B1, E1B1, E1B1A, and E1B1B is referred to as Neolithic Anatolians and Tufians and later Semitic populations. Yeah, that's real interesting as well because you can find E1B1B in Anatolia. All right. Or you can also find a Tufian culture in southwest Turkey or Anatolia as well because they found a similar material culture in the burials. So that could be why the E1B1B markers is up there. The brother said there's also a stone that mentioned David, the Tel Dad Stele. So thank you to brothers bringing out more steles that you can go look up to show where the land of Israel is. All right. The Tel Dad Stele dating to the 9th century BCE were found in Tel Dad National Park. And if I'm not mistaken, brother, you correct me if I'm wrong, that it's not in sub-Saharan Africa. The brother said the slab turned out to be part of a structure erected by the king of Aram, apparently Hazael, in the 9th century BCE. It tells about the defeat of the kingdom of Judah and Israel. That's deep. He says the key part is boasting about King Jehoram being Ahab, right? So we know who that is, king of the northern kingdom of Israel, right? There is some in dispute over part of the ancient debilitation text in the Ahaziah, king of the Bit David, or Bit David, matching the biblical narrative. Brother. Man. Who else voted? Brother? Why did you vote for that? Is there any reason you believe Israel is in sub-Saharan Africa? Is there anyone else brave enough to, put that they did vote that Israel was in sub-Saharan Africa, like the brother Isaiah? All right. Brother, can you explain why you believe that? I'm not trying to put you on blast or nothing, but I just want to know why, you came to that conclusion. The brother says we must have came across similar sources. I'm learning toward. Right. So yeah, okay. So yeah, brothers, y'all doing good work. Keep researching. Keep looking into it. Keep looking into it, brothers. You'll find it. The brother says the children of Moab also stop off Judah on the Mesha stele. Yep. Also known as the Moabite stone, is a stele dated around 840 BCE containing a site inscription in the name King of Mesha of Moab. All right. In these places that they're finding these steles and stones and archaeological findings is not in sub-Saharan Africa, family. Facts, brother. We had to do it. We had to do it because it gets real annoying. Bro, it gets real annoying when you have people spamming your comments, with the same ideology, that Israel is in sub-Saharan Africa. They say the same thing. Oh, Abraham went south into Nubia. Oh, the Israelites lived in southern Africa with the Canaanites and Egyptians. Like, how can you just say things like this and not prove it or not have, concrete evidence? He said, during the reign to such a degree which caused a millennia of multiple to idol worship culture to have a king raised to the throne and suddenly believe in one God. Yeah. Yep. And you know who did that, or you know why that was. You know who brought that monotheism into play. The brother says the Moabite stone solidly shows that Moab was Lot nephew of Abraham, and was when. And that's another thing. I might do a part 2 as well because you keep bringing up all these other steles, and it's important because we don't have to just show that Israelites existed to show that this land or that the biblical locations was in the Levant. We can get into archaeology found on Moab. We can get into archaeology found on Edom, on Joktan, on the Assyrians, on the Akkadians, and things like that, because this leads to showing us that the biblical locations are exactly where they were. Now you can say that Israel is bigger than it is. You can say that. That'll be a more arguable, that'll be a better argument than saying it's in a whole different location. All right. You can say, oh, what if it, because I know some people that say, yeah, I believe it's in the Levant, but I believe it extends over into Egypt and Ethiopia. Okay, that's cool. They're not saying that it's not in the Levant. They're just saying that it's a bigger landmass than what people believe today. The brother says, yeah, Christianity's version just doesn't add up with the Pharaoh most likely having dealing with Moses. Facts, and even when if you want to deal with Ramesses was what, like the 1200 BCE. If we deal with that and we match up with First Chronicles chapter 6, that will put the Exodus happening, or excuse me, that will put the founding of the temple, like, or Solomon's temple, like, I guess you can say 900 to 800 B, or really 8 to 700 BCE. So that even will collide or collide with the Assyrian exile. So by default, you have to go higher than Ramesses, or what they tell you the Exodus happened today. The brother says Babylonian fortresses in the Nile of Egypt. Elam is where Kuwait is today. I've heard that. I'm not going to lie. I've heard that, which is in Arabia. If you have a little information on that, please share it, brother. Please share it. I love to look into it. The brother says ancient Babylon is at Babel, Mesopotamia. Oh, okay. Yes, that's what it's called again. On those maps, on those maps I was referring to earlier that shows Babylon in Egypt. That's what it's called, the Babylonian or the Babylon fortress. All right. It's not talking about the ancient Babylon. The brother says, anyone who thinks Israel wasn't in the Levant, speak now or forever hold your peace. Yes. I keep asking you brothers to speak. You like to comment a lot, and you like to comment a lot, but now that you have the chance to show everyone, the evidence, you don't want to, do so. The brother says, why don't we have evidence of, or more evidence of Paleo-Hebrew and Levant? And we actually do. If I can find it, I will bring it up. But even here recently, it was just a recent find, actually. I believe in the past month, where they found a new stone that had Paleo-Hebrew scriptures on it, actually. Facts. So the brother line for me and said, yeah, we do. He says the Paleo-Hebrew alphabet was used between 1000 BCE to 115 AD or 135 AD to write ancient Hebrew and biblical regions of Israel and Judah. It developed from the Proto-Canaanite script, which was used in Canaan during the late Bronze Age. Archaeologists claim to find the oldest Hebrew text in Israel, including the name of God. Scholars date tiny cursed tablets. Right, cursed tablets found in Mount Ebla to 1200 BCE. And these are the tablets that you'll read when they're just repeating. They're literally repeating, cursed by you, or cursed are you by the God of Israel. Cursed. So yes, that is true. He also says a ceramic bowl with a 2,700-year-old inscription in Hebrew was developed during an excavation in the city of David. The brother says, I'm not referring to Babylonian or Assyrian influence in Israel writings. I'm addressing the pictography, origin, or original Paleo-Hebrew. So yes, brother, they do have it in there. Maybe I have to show you all that one day, since you like a little more evidence on that. Be sure to bring that out in the near future. Let's see. Facts. And the thing is, the channels be so massive. They be getting like 3,000 views an hour type stuff, right? And even me early on, I got into this as well. I was in belief that Jerusalem was in sub-Saharan Africa. Why? Because you can find maps. You can find maps with Jerusalem that says Jerusalem is in sub-Saharan Africa. Bethesda, Bathsheba, all these biblical names, but where's the archaeological findings? Where's the history? There's no history of it. Even if you get into the history of the West Central Africans, they tell you they came from the Northeast. They didn't tell you they came from Southern Africa. The first people in Southern Africa was your Khoisan Pygmy peoples. All right. But yeah, you can find maps showing the Euphrates River being in West Africa. You can find maps showing the Tigris River being in the Tigray River. You can find maps showing Media. But what does that mean? Is that the only proof that we're gonna use, a map? What about today? I can show you 1,000 biblical names in Nigeria itself. Does that mean the land of Israel is in Nigeria? No, that means Israelites came into these locations and named these places. Come on now. Brother says facts, show the sources. And I'm really disappointed, man. I'm really disappointed because everyone made their votes, but those people that made that vote, they're not here to, share their thoughts. Where are you guys that voted for Israel and Sub-Saharan Africa? Please come share your thoughts. I'm not gonna bite. I'm being real cool. I'm being real nice. I just provided my evidence, so you come do yours. I can't even believe 50% of you all voted for that. That's crazy. Again, I'm getting to the last of these comments, so if you do have any comments or anything, please drop your questions, comments. Again, I will drop this StreamYard link one more time for if anyone wants to come up. All right, if anyone wants to come up, please come on. Again, we had a lot of you vote for Israel being in Sub-Saharan Africa. That's 29 people. All right, there's only one person that was honest enough to admit that he did vote. The brother says, thanks, Brother Will. I'll be looking out for your teachers. Thank you, brother, for tuning in. Thank you, brother, for tuning in. Facts there. They're here that just have no evidence. Yeah, I know, brother. I know they're here. I know they're here, man. I know they're here. They just don't have no evidence. That's facts. I know they're here. Well, I guess I'll get ready to wrap it up then. I presented the evidence. For, the biblical location being in Levant. I hope you all enjoyed it. I hope you all that voted for it being in the Sub-Saharan Africa. I hope you have enough, you saw enough to believe or see that, or realize rather that it is in the Levant. All right. And facts, brother, I cannot believe it. I cannot believe it either. That's what I'm saying. Where do they think these things happen? Right? Where did the Maccabean revolt happen? Right? Like, come on. Where did the tribes of Asher, tribes of Zebulun, how did they found Carthage? Did they come from the Levant? Did they come from South Africa? When the Romans came in from Europe, did they go into the Levant? Did they sail down into the Levant from Rome or Greece? Or did they sail through Northern Africa, down west across Western Africa, and down to the southern tip of Africa? When the Assyrians came, did they just come straight through over the Euphrates, down into the Syro-Palestine Rift into the Levant? Or did they go down into Sub-Saharan Africa? These are things that they have to answer. You cannot just say this. All right. And the only reason I did this video because, I got annoyed of people saying this. It was a lot of people saying this, but they're not here for some reason. So, again, I'm going to give you all about one more minute to propose your questions, to ask your questions. If not, man, I'm going to wrap it up. And I'll see you all next week, man. And I hope you all have enough evidence and information to see where the true land of Israel is. And for those who come on my channel, saying this again, I'll just show you to this video. You have to debunk a lot of stuff found within this video. All right, because again, we looked at historical accounts, we looked at archaeological records, we looked at anthropology, And it's all pointing to the Near East, all right? It's all pointing to the Near East. So, give me 1 second. Look at the comment chat or look at the comments one last time and see what's going on. If not, we're going to dip out. The brother said Israelites fled beyond the rivers of Ethiopia. By their logic, that means they were in Africa and fled to Europe. Oh my Lord. And that's another thing. How it's so many questions that you have to answer scripturally, historically, period. How in the world can Zephaniah 3:10 be fulfilled if Israel is in South or East Africa? How? But again, man, I'm about to play this outro. If you all have any questions, you have until then to ask them. If not, I'll see you all next Shabbat. All right. Let's see. Let's see. If not, I will see you all next Shabbat.
Felt the Holy Spirit on my leg rock. I eat my daily bread for the day, not no red robin. If I don't got the verse of the day, then my man's got it. It's something about the word called faith, my head got it. Woke up, made my bed, your bed sloppy. Preach the word in my new J's, they dead stop. Got on live declaring the gospel, my fans got it. Hunting demons, I think they gon' hit me with manslaughter. I woke up and had to thank the Lord cause I'm a living being. Eat my daily bread in the morning, but this ain't Jimmy Dean. God moving, prayer line longer than a limousine. You either hate one or love one, it ain't no in between. The Lord grabbed me out when I hit rock bottom. Now I'm at the top, I told the devil you can't stop now. He mad, he pissed, well, oh well, not my problem. He sad, he finna go to hell while I look down watching. You wanna change your life, here go the remedy. Wake up and give it to the Lord and not the enemy. You see the joy, that's the Holy Spirit that got in me. Can't be destroyed cause I know big God gon' spend for me. What you speaking out your mouth, better be life. What you teaching to these people, better be Christ. Hit the block and I'm hunting for demons, not gonna be nice. The people watching, they couldn't believe it, I'ma be fine. So they asked me how I changed, I said big God. They asked me do I read the word, I said big time. I used to ride around with lethal weapons, was a big nine. And now I'm prayed up and I'm protected, I got big God.